Hey folks, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us here on GenAI Live. My name is Adrian Miguel. I'm a principal partner enterprise architect here at AWS. Been here shade under 9 years, and I'm joined today by co-host, partner in crime, mentor, and all-around good guy, Wayne Saxe. Say hey, Wayne.
Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate the kind introduction. I hope I've earned it in the long time that we've known each other.
Don't make me take it back.
We'll see. My name is Wayne Saxe. I am a solutions architecture leader here at AWS. I've been with the company for 8.5 years, I think, going on to that number times-ish. It's been a ride, and it's been amazing to watch where we were and where we are, and just to imagine where we're going.
Yeah.
We're here today, not to talk about me, but to talk about generative AI and our partners, and the amazing things that our partners are doing to make generative AI a real, capable, thing for our mutual customers. And it's not me, but it's actually going to be Matt Connor who tells us these things. He's the director of product management with Anyscale, and we're just really excited to have you here. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We're really excited to be here and have the opportunity to join you all and chat about the work that we're doing at Anyscale. So thanks for having us on.
So, first question that comes to mind, Matt. When we talk about things like generative AI and net new or emerging technologies, the very first thing that, in speaking with customers and partners, is just a level of uncertainty. Many are just, they know they got to do something. They must embrace the technology, leverage it, or their competition may, or they just may fall behind altogether. What are you hearing from customers as they approach Anyscale with a wish list, or kind of that corporate edict that says you got to use this, or potentially we could fall behind?
Yeah, it's interesting. At Anyscale, we got our start really from academic research done at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
Our co-founders were really trying to do some research into reinforcement learning algorithms, and found the tools they had at the time really couldn't scale to meet the challenge. They created our open source technology, Ray, which serves as a key foundational piece of AI platforms and has become really widely adopted for AI and generative AI workloads.
Okay.
As a case in point, just to give you a little bit of backstory, OpenAI actually trained ChatGPT and started sort of the genesis of all of this using Ray and our technology.
Okay.
And so when customers come to us, they're really struggling with, how do I scale? How can I go about fine-tuning these models to make them available for specific tasks that we're working on? How can I do inference with these and have control over these models? And ultimately, what sort of use cases can I unlock? And so when they're coming to us, it's looking to scale, it's looking to make use of the latest models, the latest hardware, Trainium, Inferentia, and more. And so we're really operating at sort of that infrastructure layer.
Wow.
That's really interesting. So I'm curious, it's relatively early days for most customers in this space. And I think my impression, my interaction with customers is that they are in a variety of places, in the maturity model, in the maturity curve.
Yep.
They're everywhere from, very early to they've been doing this for a while. And yet, almost all of them sort of hit this point where they're like, this is really complex. And it just like grinds some of these things to a halt, whether it's a POC to production or it's a production workload that they want to scale to, the whole enterprise or whatever, right, wherever they are on that curve. And it sounds like you've been thinking about that type of problem for a while, and I'm really curious to hear about, your perspective on that sort of sprawling complexity.
Yeah, we call it the AI complexity wall. And there's really a number of components that make up this wall where people sort of run headlong into it and need help. First and foremost is there's a new model almost every week, it feels like.
Yeah.
And so being able to keep up with the pace of innovation and get to production is challenging. But just as often as we hear about new models, if we were on this show 2 years ago and we mentioned a GPU, that'd probably be, maybe 3 years ago now, that would probably be the end of the conversation. Now it's which GPU is right for my model. Can I use a different accelerator, one of the ones from AWS, Inferentia, and able to use that in my applications. And ultimately, on top of that, there are a number of different frameworks that people might want to use, VLM, LangChain, et cetera, to actually build these applications. And so what ends up happening is these teams are sitting there trying to optimize for all of these different pieces to deliver business value, to do it right in terms of actually making the most efficient use of all the resources they have, making sure it's reliable and scalable. So a couple stats we're always sort of stunned by. The average utilization of resources is less than 66%. So imagine sitting there paying imagine if you had a data scientist who only worked 50% of the time, that's no good. So when they turn to us, it's how do I get more out of what I have? How do I simplify and have confidence that I'm choosing a partner that future-proofs me and can deliver what I need to deliver?
Wow. I mean, even just that stat of 66%.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's kind of stunning.
It is pretty stunning. You just think about it in terms of raw infrastructure and machinery. It's like, hey, I've got a giant hypervisor that I'm only using a third of, or a third is sitting idle. It's the exact same thing. The question is, how do I turn it off? How do I eke it out? How do I leverage whatever capacity is left? Or the alternative is, what are you going to do to make up for that loss? And yeah, I really like and appreciate the way that you're approaching that. You mentioned Ray. So as an AI compute engine, how does it help your customers and these organizations overcome the aforementioned AI complexity wall? Because yeah, you make mention everybody eventually hits the wall in some way. I've done it personally in POCs and experimentations, and it can be daunting enough that you can't really see over or around the side. We'd be very curious to see what you've observed and understand how you're helping organizations get over that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we think of Ray as an AI compute engine, there's a few dimensions to that. First is being able to make use of what we can call heterogeneous hardware. Okay. So being able to use CPUs, GPUs, and neuron-based accelerators in a single cluster. And why that matters, and hopefully we'll talk about it in a second, is think about some of the GenAI applications with multimodal data. Actually being able to make use of different resources in a single cluster can really improve that utilization problem we talked about. So the first fundamental capability of an AI compute engine is an ability to abstract and really use any infrastructure, any chip that's available. The next is being able to actually use any framework on top of that and scale it. So, for traditional AI, that might be frameworks like PyTorch or TensorFlow. For Gen AI, we might be talking frameworks like VLM. And so being able to use the frameworks you like and scale those and run those on any hardware is super important. Observability, and then making it very easy and abstracting it for developers. So Ray has a number of high-level libraries that, if you're processing data, fine-tuning models, deploying models, there's higher-level abstractions for developers that make it very, very easy for them to not worry about all the underlying systems and how they're set up and how they're scaling and how they're working. So we really abstract away all of that complexity from the end user so that they can really focus ultimately on an actual application.
Oh, look, I'm just thinking aloud and remembering the things that were mentioned in the keynote last night by Peter DeSantis about how you want to being able to scale to the level of complexity that you required is one thing, but then being able to empower a developer or an end user of this and say, hey, go through your problem at it, and we're going to help you select the appropriate library, the appropriate methodology, make sure we're using the right resources, and you don't have to go manage, okay, here's your GPU cluster, here's your raw compute, here's your storage engine, here's your CUDA driver, here's your XYZ, and oh, by the way, here's a stack of Tritium and Inferentia Ultra cluster. If I'm a back-end developer, I'm like, I don't know what this is, and that's the wall. But being able to give somebody the path forward or provide almost like the choose your own adventure path, that's huge.
It really is. So most organizations have at least dipped their toe into generative AI, and they probably not all have used Ray. So so where do they get started in order to make use of the work that you've done?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that people get started. First, Ray is an open source project, so we'll see a lot of people go and download it and install and start playing around with it. But what we've done at Anyscale is we've built a managed Ray platform, and we've focused on sort of 5 areas around that platform that make it really the ideal place to get started. Okay. First is the most performant Ray that you can get. We call it Ray Turbo.
Okay.
Maybe not the most creative naming, but it's a hyper-optimized version that really is faster, more cost-efficient, and more scalable and reliable. We've then added a whole set of developer tooling. So to your question on how to get started, when you come to Anyscale and start using Anyscale's version of Ray, we've built a whole set of developer tooling, better observability, seamless path to go to production, to really make it the best place to actually develop your application and then ultimately deploy it and run it with the very best price and performance you can get.
So, love it. And I guess that takes me to the next thing, which is, you've talked a little bit about like the impact that it brings, but I know you've worked with some really great customers. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about like what where your customers saw challenges and where you guys came in and helped them.
Yeah, there's a number of customers would love to mention here. Canva, they bring pretty magical design experiences to I think over 200 million people. Yep. And so when we think generative AI, it's more than just LLMs. There's also video generation models, stable diffusion models as they're called. And so Canva came to work with Anyscale to help scale their training and use billions of images to help make it a more powerful Magic Studio. So when you go into Canva and build those experiences. When we think about a lot of the other customers that we work with, I think there's an element of reaching a certain complexity where they really want to self-manage and have the flexibility and control over exactly how their applications are deployed. If you think about agentic applications and where we're going, there might be certain pieces of that broader AI application that you might not need an H200 and the most expensive hardware to do it. You might be able to use less expensive options that meet the requirements. So we typically see customers, if we're talking about the maturity curve, once they validate a concept, maybe they use OpenAI or something like that, they then realize, actually, I now want to optimize it and actually run it in production, and there's additional complexities coming into play here, and that's when they turn to Ray and they really start saying, hey, we really need to self-manage this, and we need to do it at the very best price performance we can get, and start taking control over the entire stack and what that looks like.
Wow, I mean, it's refreshing, and I mean this very sincerely. It's refreshing to create the open source library, provide a managed option for it, and then allowing the customer to retain level of control, interoperability, even, dare I say, a level of risk where they want to be the ones to continue tuning and optimizing to better serve the use case, or they can choose to leverage you and your team to continue to go through and manage it. I have an ethos in managed services. I ran the AWS MSP program on the tech side for quite a number of years, and this is exactly what we've been kind of banging our heads against the wall for many years, of providing 3 different models and paths effectively to customers to help meet them wherever they are. Do it for me, do it with me, or do it alongside me. And it sounds like you've found that perfect, nice little nexus for everybody to be able to provide that level of interoperability. That's commendable.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's, we focus a lot of our energies on, what problems do our customers have and what makes the most sense for them. So, as they reach a certain stage, we're right there with them to work with them.
So I love that you sort of centered on the customer problem, because that's sort of how Amazon thinks about the world too. We work back from what our customers are saying is their challenge. And so one thing that I think has helped customers sort of get their heads around these problem statements is the challenge that you saw, either with a customer or even yourself when you were constructing this thing that says, oh, like, this is why we ended up with Ray. So I'm curious, like, what was the origin challenge that led us to Ray?
Wow,
that's a great interview question.
It is. It is.
Sorry.
I'll talk about the academic background, but then I want to talk about a kind of a customer origin story on how they got there. With the academic background, I alluded to it, was research being done. So our 2 founders, Robert and Philip, we're doing research into reinforcement learning algorithms. And the real problem that they ran into is that they weren't really doing any research. They were spending all of their time setting up infrastructure and trying to manage distributed systems and not actually getting a chance to see, hey, is this algorithm really compelling for what I'm trying to do? And so from that, they realized, we're not alone in this problem. There's a whole bunch of people who have this problem, and many more are going to have this problem. And so, the insight at the time was a very flexible Python first framework that handled all of that would become the standard. And that's turned out to be a great bet. We just had our annual conference where we had some 2,000 people there. Companies like Uber, OpenAI, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon actually put out a post on using Ray and being able to save $120 million a year by switching to Ray for their data processing workloads. So very brilliant work that they did. And when we talk about a customer origin story, we typically hear customers come in and there's a very specific pain point that they're just really struggling to overcome. Maybe a legacy system that they're using just isn't well suited for what they're trying to do. And a great case in point is around multimodal data. Runway ML is making some of the most breathtaking video models that you can imagine. Gen 3 Alpha. The work that they're doing, where you can type in, show me someone walking through a city, and it gives you an unbelievable movie out of that. But the challenge that they run into was very specifically, how do I process videos to train these sorts of models? And that's where their origin story starts is, well, hey, Ray is flexible enough to do this. It can make use of the right underlying infrastructure. And from there, they sort of start and realize, hey, there's something here for anything we really want to do, and expand from there.
Wow, that's an answer, all right.
It sure is. No, I like it.
So before we get ready to wrap here, general question, and not down the way of an interview question, which, by the way, was fantastic. If I'm a customer, and I speak with customers of all shapes, sizes, with all sorts of different ideas of what they want to do with themselves, what would be your point of advice, given your purview and having created this fantastic solution? What would your advice be to a customer getting started in this space? Is it identify the problem and work back from it, or just start training, start doing something? Where would you?
I think it's always a good idea to start with the problem you're trying to solve. So regardless of where you are in your journey, being relentlessly focused on what pain, what problem am I solving, and what model might I be able to use is sort of a secondary consideration from, hey, let's really focus on building the very best solution to this specific pain point. So Canva, how do we make experiences more magical? What is the number one thing we can do? Well, scaling laws tell us we can train better models that people will like more. So regardless of where you are in the Gen AI journey, I think starting with the customer problem and then saying, what can we do to make this problem better? Is there anything annoying about this process? And if there is, let's fix it. And if turns out that LLMs and Gen AI can help, well, we're right there to help you.
And it definitely sounds like I'm sensing a theme here where it's focusing on the actual business problem, not the tech, not the, hey, how do I manage this heap of GPUs? I'm memory constrained. It is always identify the problems material to the business that matters to potentially the end customer to go out and tackle first, because the rest is, you can figure that out. So.
And leave the rest to us. Yeah, that's where we really focus. And we work with people who are building amazing platforms and applications, and we focus all of our attention on making sure that when they do that, they get the very best performance and efficiency imaginable, and we handle how all those clusters are managed and what happens there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt. Wayne, any
No, I would just say thank you. This has been enlightening, and I'm I've been in with AWS for a long time, working with many partners for a long time, and I think almost the universal truth is it's really tough to be expert at everything, and almost always, like, we all get better outcomes when we lean on the expertise of the experts.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you guys are experts.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here and work with AWS, and look forward to many more great years ahead. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. It's just yet another example of the better together story, because when we do put our heads together, we tend to have significantly better outcomes. Yeah. So absolutely hang tight. We'll be back shortly after a quick break. We'll be chatting with Pete McAvoy of DXC. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.